Hey everybody, it's Jake from Pro in Winchester, Virginia, and this is, I don't know, today's Wednesday, I think. I kind of lost track of the days, honestly. I've been here for like a week and a half by myself. Um, and today I'd like to talk a little bit about pain. This is something that we talk with all of our clients about at some point in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's someone who's coming to us for rehab purposes, or it's an athlete that we're working with for sports performance. Um, Pain is this very big topic. It's on everybody's mind. And it's something that's really interesting to me, and as well as a lot of my friends and colleagues. I mean, I'm a huge nerd when it comes to this stuff. But we talk about pain a lot. And I think in today's society, it's something that is oftentimes like on our minds, because if you watch TV, every time you see a drug commercial, it's like, are you in pain? Do you have these symptoms? Don't live in pain. You know, you're driving down the street, there's a billboard, and it's like, do you have pain? Come talk to our orthopedic surgeons and we'll fix you. And it's this just very pervasive and strong narrative that pain is this bad, big, scary thing. And it certainly can be, right? Like, pain is something that it's uncomfortable. We don't like it. It can be weird and strange, and um, it can be certainly associated with like bad traumatic things. But at the same time, pain is also this very natural phenomenon that we have as part of everyday life. Kind of innate survival mechanism that helps to prevent us from, potentially having some sort of tissue damage or from being in some sort of threat. And the interesting thing is, if we didn't have pain, we probably wouldn't survive that long. There's actually a medical condition, and I forget the term for it, but there's actually a condition where you don't experience pain, and those people have to figure out how to respond to different stimulus in the world because they have issues regulating their temperature. So if an individual who is unable to experience pain like puts their hand on a hot stove, they're probably going to get a crazy burn because they have no way of regulating that experience. And so while we think a lot of times this pain is this like horrible, gross, nasty, uncomfortable experience, it's actually something that's really helpful for just our existence as a human being. So I think a lot of times if we can reframe our understanding of pain and see it less as this big, scary thing and something that's natural and that we will more than likely experience on a daily basis, it can make it much more manageable. And before you go talking about how this is like super reductionist or this doesn't accurately depict the understanding of pain science, I know that. There are a lot of other people who are way smarter than me that can explain this stuff way better. But much in the line of people like Lorimer Mosley or Adrian Lau or some of my friends like Michael Amato, I think being able to use things like stories, whether it's allegories or metaphors with TV shows or comic books or movies, being able to communicate with a patient effectively so that they can understand a concept, I think is really important. So one of the pervasive ideas that we see is that pain and tissue damage are equivocal, right? That in order to have pain, you have to have some sort of structural tissue damage. But the reality is that that's not exactly true. They certainly can be correlated, and if something happens like, if you break a leg or an arm, you certainly might experience pain with that, but it doesn't mean that you have to. So two examples that I like to use are phantom limb syndrome. And if you're not familiar with phantom limb syndrome, it's something that can be pretty common in a post-amputee population, where if a limb, say, like your leg, like a below-knee amputation occurs, the patient who has that done may still experience almost an insane amount of pain in their foot or their leg, even though there isn't actually a leg there anymore. And so that's an instance where we can certainly have pain, but we don't even have tissue. And then conversely, I'm sure most of you have experienced something where you wake up and you like look down at your arm or your leg and you're like, where did that bruise come from? Right? That's an instance where you may not remember that actually happening. Like you probably hit like the counter or the coffee table or something, and you have tissue damage. Like there's a bruise, you see swelling, but you don't remember having a pain experience. And so when I'm communicating with a patient, a lot of times those two little vignettes or stories are things that I use to help communicate this idea that pain and tissue damage are not one and the same. They can certainly be related and we may experience them concurrently, but it doesn't mean that pain equals damage. Start to think about the experiences that you have, right? So say you have a little bit of a flare up when you're playing basketball or you're lifting weights, right? Try to put that into context a little bit. Now, granted, this is outside of like crazy catastrophic things or like acute injuries, but if it's something that you've been dealing with for a long time, a lot of times if we can start to understand why it is that we're feeling what we feel, it makes it more bearable. When we start putting things into context, we can start modifying our activities and working around pain if we were to have it. In most instances, natural tissue healing timeframes usually go ballpark 4 to 8 weeks, right? If you were to break a bone, usually within 6 to 8 weeks, that bone has reformed. The vast majority of structural injuries that we have, whether it's a strain, scrape, bruise, bump, cut, what have you, usually heals up within about 4 to 8 weeks, ballpark. Now, if we keep that natural tissue healing time frame in mind, when we have things that are nagging or chronic, especially in the sports population, things like, oh, my knee's been kind of achy or my hamstring's been kind of tweaky. A lot of situations like that where, maybe we had an acute injury 2-3 months ago, more than likely that structure's probably been healed up, right? If they just continue to have this chronic level of pain or discomfort, it may not necessarily be that there is a structural thing going on. It may come down to more or less their cumulative training effect, their overall preparedness, their activity tolerance, and a whole bunch of other stuff that we would study and, like account for from a PT perspective, right? But if we look at those natural healing timeframes and we look at the context of what that person is experiencing, a lot of times we can do some modifications. So there are certain variables that we can play with. Load, intensity, range of motion. Make training or exercise possible. And this is totally not medical advice, right? This is just me kind of explaining and hopefully providing a little bit of education about the subject of pain. But I think if we know more about pain, it makes it easier for us to live with it and to deal with it. Because it's not this like crazy burden that we should all be afraid of. It's a natural part of life. It's something that we should respect, but also seek to understand. Because then it makes our existence a little bit more tolerable and a lot less scary. So if you guys have questions about pain or you'd like to talk to me further about it, I'll post my contact information below. And I can also provide you with some resources to people that are way smarter than me and that literally study this stuff for a living.